The first time I saw it, I almost convinced myself I hadn't. The ballroom-level conference room on the 42nd floor had been dressed to look like a magazine spread, white orchids in low bowls, a wall of champagne flutes catching the city lights, and the kind of music that never dared to become a song. Everything smelled like citrus and expensive cologne and the faint heat of 100 bodies pretending they weren't tired. I was there because I was good at my job, because I knew how to glide through these things, with a glass in my hand and my shoulders down, because I'd learned how to look like I belonged even on nights when my feet ached inside shoes that were more statement than comfort. Damon was there because Damon always was, one of those executives who moved like the room was made for him, calm and unhurried, with that particular kind of confidence that wasn't loud, but still made people orbit. He had a salt and pepper neatness to him, the kind that suggested he woke up already composed. When he laughed, people laughed too, like it was the polite thing to do. I'd spoken to him plenty of times in meetings, one-on-one in hallways, in the elevator when we both pretended the silence was normal. I knew his work face, generous, analytical, slightly amused, never rattled. I did not know anything about his private face. I didn't know he had one. Until he sat across from me on a tufted bench near the windows and crossed his legs. It was small. So small, my brain tried to throw it away. A fraction of an inch between the hem of his tailored pants and the shine of his shoe. In that sliver, right at the curve of his ankle, the light caught a band that wasn't sock. It wasn't the matte cotton of men's dress socks, and it wasn't bare skin. It was sheer, black, smooth like ink diluted with water, with that faint reinforced line at the edge that pantyhose have when they're pulled to the perfect tension. My stomach dipped as if I'd missed a stare. I blinked, looked away, looked back. The line was still there. My brain did this quick scramble. Maybe compression socks? Maybe a weird sock brand? But no, I'd worn pantyhose often enough, cursed them, rolled them carefully up my legs, felt the tiny bite of elastic at the ankle. I knew that line the way you know your own signature. Damon's foot swung once, almost idly, and the fabric shimmered. I felt my cheeks warm, not from embarrassment exactly, but from a sudden, electric curiosity that came with a prickle of recognition. Someone I'd filed away as untouchable, polished, and thoroughly contained had a seam showing. He was talking to someone beside him, one of the VPs, a man who always sounded like he was mid-pitch. Damon's attention tilted between him and the room, that practiced executive habit of listening while scanning. His hands were relaxed on his knee. His posture was immaculate. Nothing about him said nervous. And yet, that little band at his ankle felt like a confession, accidentally left on the table. I took a sip of champagne that tasted like pears and tried to breathe through my own ridiculous reaction. The word that popped into my head was kinky, which made me laugh internally because it felt too blunt for the moment, too loud. Another word came softer and more accurate. Brave. And then, almost immediately, another. Lonely. Because if he was wearing that here, at a company event under the lights in front of people who loved to gossip, then either he didn't care what anyone thought, or he cared very much and was doing it anyway. Both possibilities made my pulse jump. I should have ignored it. I told myself that, as if the telling would do anything. I should have let him keep his secret, should have stayed in the lane of professional decorum where everything is tidy and everyone pretends they are exactly what they appear. But my brain kept returning to that line like a tongue to a sore tooth. I found myself tracking him across the room, watching how he moved, how he shifted his weight, how his pant legs fell. I wasn't looking for more. I was, and I hated that I was. Then later, when the speeches started and we all gathered near the small stage, he stepped closer to me in the crowd, the way people do when the room compresses. I could smell him then, something clean and woody, and his shoulder nearly brushed mine. I felt the absurd urge to say, "I saw you." I also felt the equally absurd urge to protect him from being seen by anyone else. Those urges tangled into something that made my voice come out a little lower when I finally spoke. "Long night," I said, making it sound like a throwaway. He glanced at me, and for a second his expression softened into something human and tired. "Long week," he corrected, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Worth it?" I asked. "For the quarterly narrative? Sure." He tipped his head toward the stage like we were both watching a play. "For the hors d'oeuvres?" He made a face that made me laugh. It should have ended there. That was safe. But my body leaned a fraction closer anyway. The way you lean toward a candle even when you know you'll feel the heat. "You know," I said, keeping my tone light, "you're the only person I've ever seen who looks comfortable at these things." His gaze held mine a beat longer than necessary. "Comfortable is a skill," he said. "And you're good at skills," I replied, then felt a sudden reckless spark. "Some skills are Surprising. I didn't look at his ankle when I said it. I didn't have to. I watched his face. For a second, nothing changed. He stayed perfectly executive. Then, in a blink-fast flicker, his eyes sharpened like a camera focusing. His throat bobbed. He smiled, but it wasn't the casual smile from earlier. It had an edge, a question. Surprising, he repeated carefully. I let my own smile be small and private, the kind you might share over a joke no one else can hear. I like surprises, I said. I turned my attention back to the stage before I could overdo it. My heart was thumping too hard for a conversation that had, on the surface, been nothing. After the speeches, after the crowd loosened, Damon drifted away the way he always did, gently, without making anyone feel dismissed. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself under harsh lighting, smoothing my lipstick with a finger, listening to the muffled noise of the event through the door. My reflection looked the same, black dress, sheer tights of my own, hair pinned back, but my eyes were different, too bright, too awake. I left the bathroom determined to behave. I failed immediately. I found him near the bar, alone for once, looking down at his phone like it was something he could hide behind. The light from the city washed his face in silver. I walked up and stood beside him like it was normal, like I wasn't about to step over a line I couldn't see. Do you ever get tired of being the calm one? I asked. He looked up, surprised, then thoughtful. Sometimes, he admitted, but it's easier than being the messy one. I laughed softly. Messy is underrated. I don't know, he said, and there it was again, that flicker of something underneath. Messy has consequences. I let my hand rest lightly on the bar, close but not touching him. Only if the wrong people get to define what messy means, I said. Then, as casually as I could manage, I added, I think it's kind of powerful when someone does what they want, even if it's not what people expect. Damon's eyes searched my face. He didn't speak right away. The room's noise seemed to recede, or maybe that was just my attention narrowing. Finally, he said very quietly, You noticed. It wasn't a question. It was a statement that landed like a dropped coin, small, unmistakable, irrevocable. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to stay gentle. I did, I said, only because I was close. And I'm not. I shook my head, careful. I'm not here to embarrass you. He let out a breath that looked like it hurt to release. I didn't think you were, he said, and the fact that he'd considered it at all made my chest tighten. I'm here, I said, and then realized how that sounded and added quickly, as a person, not as Office Julie. That earned me a small, real smile. Office Julie, he echoed. Yeah, the one who pretends she doesn't trip over her own feet and heels. You don't trip, he said. I do. I just do it internally. That got him. A quiet laugh, low and warm, and in that laugh I felt a door crack open. We didn't talk about it again that night, not explicitly. We talked about the city, the ridiculousness of corporate speeches, how the view from that high up always made you feel like you were floating. But something had changed. When he said goodnight, his hand brushed my elbow for a second longer than politeness required. It was nothing. It was everything. After that, Damon started finding reasons to talk to me. It wasn't dramatic. It was just consistent. A message asking my opinion on a project that didn't need my opinion. A stop by my desk with a question he could have emailed. A shared elevator ride where he didn't scroll on his phone. It felt like he was testing the ground, seeing if it would hold his weight. I told myself to be normal. I also bought a new lipstick in a shade called Bitten Cherry because I'm not immune to my own imagination. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the event, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee outside the office. Not in the building cafe, not with the hum of printers and coworkers passing by, but across the street at a small place that smelled like cinnamon and espresso. It was cold enough that the air bit our cheeks. He wore a dark coat, gloves, the picture of composed. I wore a scarf that made me feel like a character in a movie. We sat by the window with our cups steaming, and I watched him wrap his hands around the ceramic like he needed the warmth. I've been thinking about what you said, he began. Which part? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The part about powerful, he said, eyes on his coffee. Doing what you want? I nodded slowly. I meant it. He lifted his gaze. Most people, he said carefully, would not have meant it. My throat tightened with tenderness I hadn't expected. Most people don't deserve access, I said. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sigh. That's a very diplomatic way to put it. I'm capable of diplomacy, I said, then softened. But I'm also capable of being not the wrong person. His eyes held mine, and something in his face shifted into a vulnerability that made him look younger, not in age, but in openness. I don't know why I wore them that night, he admitted. I mean, I do know, but I don't know why I chose that night. Maybe because you were tired of being the calm one, I offered. He smiled faintly. Maybe. I let the silence sit between us like a blanket. Then, because I didn't want him to feel like he had to push further than he wanted, I said, "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." "I want to," he said, surprising both of us. His jaw worked as if he was shaping the words carefully. "I've wanted to talk about it for a long time. Just not like this. Not in a cafe across from the office." He glanced around as if someone might be listening, then leaned in a fraction. "It's always been there. Since I was, I don't know, young. The fabric, the feeling, the wrongness of wanting it when you're told you shouldn't." I felt my chest tighten again, not with scandal, but with recognition of that kind of wanting, the kind that grows in the dark if you don't give it air. "That sounds exhausting," I said quietly. "It is," he said. "And then it's also—" He stopped, then laughed under his breath, almost embarrassed. "It's also comforting. And yes, it's sexy, but that word feels dangerous to say out loud." "You can say it with me," I said, a gentle challenge. "Sexy isn't a crime." His eyes flicked to mine, startled, then softened. "Sexy," he repeated, and the way he said it, like he was tasting it, made my skin prickle. We built trust in small bricks after that. We didn't jump from coffee to secrets to some fantasy montage. We moved like people who knew the stakes. Damon was an executive. I was not. The power difference mattered, and we named it. We talked about boundaries. We talked about discretion. We talked about what would happen if anyone at work found out we were close in any way that wasn't professional. It wasn't romantic yet, not officially, but it was intimate. It had the intimacy of honesty, which can be more naked than skin. The first time he came to my apartment, it was on a Saturday afternoon when the winter light was pale and flat, and the city looked like it had been sketched in charcoal. He stood in my doorway, holding a bottle of wine like he didn't know where to put his hands. I'd cleaned too much. My place smelled like lemon cleaner and the vanilla candle I'd lit in a panic. I'd told him, before he came, that he could change his mind at any moment, that we could just drink wine and talk, that he didn't owe me a show. He'd texted back, "I'm not doing this for you," and that, more than anything, had made me respect him. We sat on my couch, shoes off, our knees angled toward each other. The wine tasted like cherries and oak. We talked for an hour about everything and nothing, movies, travel, the weirdness of being adults who still felt like they were improvising. Then he set his glass down with a deliberateness that made my stomach flutter. "I brought something," he said. I kept my voice soft. "Only if you want." He nodded. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small fabric pouch, the kind you'd get from a fancy store. His hands were steady, but his eyes were not. "I've never shown anyone," he admitted. The tenderness that flooded me felt almost painful. "Thank you," I said, and meant it like a vow. He opened the pouch and took out a pair of black pantyhose, folded carefully, and then, after a pause, a pair of black heels, simple and elegant, not costumey, not exaggerated. They were beautiful. He looked at them like they were both treasure and threat. "I bought them months ago," he confessed. "I didn't know why, I just did." I inhaled slowly. "They're gorgeous." He let out a breath that sounded like relief. "You don't think it's ridiculous?" "I think it's you," I said, "and I think you deserve to have things that feel like you." His eyes went shiny, and he blinked fast as if annoyed at himself. "I don't know how to do it," he said, voice rougher. "Not the mechanics, the feeling. I don't know how to be seen." I shifted closer, but I didn't touch him without asking. "Can I help?" I said. He swallowed. "Yes," he whispered, "if you want to." So we made it gentle. We made it slow. We made it playful when it needed to be, serious when it mattered. I offered him my bathroom, my mirror, my privacy. He changed behind a closed door, because that was what felt safe. When he came out, he was still Damon in the face, those familiar eyes, that familiar mouth. But his posture had changed, his shoulders slightly hunched like he expected ridicule. The pantyhose were smooth under the hem of a longer shirt he'd brought, the heels making him taller and somehow more deliberate. I didn't let myself stare like he was a spectacle. I looked at him like he was a person. "You look incredible," I said simply. He gave a shaky laugh. "You're lying." I'm not, I said. Look at me. When his eyes met mine, I kept my gaze steady. You look like you're finally breathing. He stood very still, like my words were holding him upright. I feel exposed, he admitted. That's fair, I said. We can stop. We can change. We can do whatever you need. He shook his head. No, I want to stay here. I want to get used to it. He glanced toward my vanity. He cleared his throat. You mentioned makeup once. My pulse fluttered. Only if you want, I said again. I want, he said more firmly this time. Then quieter. I want to be pretty. Something in me cracked open at that, at the honesty, at the longing. Come here, I said, and held out my hand, palm up, offering without demanding. His eyes turned to mine in the mirror. In them, I saw something I hadn't seen at work, gratitude so raw it was almost frightening, and underneath it, something darker and warmer. Desire, yes, but also trust. The kind of trust that makes you careful with your own hands. Our dress-up dates became a thing over the next few months, not because we were trying to turn his identity into a hobby, but because ritual can be a bridge. Sometimes he came to my place. Sometimes I went to his, though that was rarer. His home felt like it belonged to his public self, all clean lines and neutral colors, a space curated to keep secrets quiet. When we dressed up, we made it ours. We'd pick music, old jazz, synthy pop, sometimes the ridiculous drama of movie soundtracks. We'd drink something sweet. I'd lay out options like it was a boutique, dresses that swished when you moved, heels that clicked with authority, pantyhose that made skin look like satin. He bought his own pieces slowly, carefully, choosing quality over quantity like he did with everything. He started to learn what he liked, the weight of a skirt, the way a certain neckline made him stand taller, the softness of fabric that didn't demand he be square-edged and contained. One night in early spring, when the city finally started to smell like wet earth instead of exhaust and cold metal, Damon stood in my living room in a sleek black dress that made him look like a film noir star. I had curled his hair into soft waves. His makeup was perfect, his own hand steadier now, my help more like guidance than necessity. He looked at himself in the mirror and then at me, and his smile was different, not shaky, not questioning, but steady. I want to go out, he said. My heart jumped. Like, out? He nodded, and the bravado in his face trembled just slightly at the edges. Yes, not to the office, not near anyone we know, but somewhere. A bar, a lounge, somewhere people dress up anyway. I felt a rush of pride so strong it made my eyes sting. Okay, I breathed. Okay, we can do that. His gaze held mine. Will you come with me? Of course, I said immediately, then softened, making sure I didn't accidentally make it about me. But only if you want me there. Only if it helps. It helps, he admitted. It helps more than I can explain. We planned it like a mission, which made me laugh because it was also, in its own way, romantic. We picked a place across town where the lighting was low and the clientele was a mix of artists, couples, tourists, people who weren't scanning for corporate hierarchies. We chose a night that wasn't too crowded. We talked through exit plans and safety like adults who understood the world could be unkind. Damon surprised me by taking the precautions seriously without shrinking. I'm not ashamed, he said when I suggested a jacket to wear outside. I'm just not interested in being a headline. Same, I said, and he laughed. When the night came, I felt nervous in a way that made my palms sweat. Not because I thought he'd look bad, he looked stunning, but because I knew the weight of being seen. We took a rideshare, sitting close in the back seat, the city sliding by in streaks of neon. Damon's hand found mine, and he squeezed once, a silent question. Are we really doing this? I squeezed back. Yes. Outside the lounge, the air was cool, the sidewalk damp. The door guy glanced at us, took in our dresses and heels, and then simply stepped aside. No stare, no comment, just a nod like we belonged. Damon's breath hitched, and I felt him steady himself. Inside, the room glowed amber. Music pulsed, soft and heavy. People leaned into each other, laughing, flirting, living. No one cared about our corporate titles. No one cared about Damon's past. For the first 10 minutes, he barely spoke, his eyes wide as if he was watching a movie where he'd somehow become the protagonist. Then at the bar, a woman with glitter on her eyelids complimented his lipstick. That shade is everything, she said, casual as sunlight. Damon blinked, then smiled, a real smile that lit him up. Thank you, he said, and his voice didn't crack. He turned to me afterward, eyes shining. She didn't, he shook his head, almost laughing. She didn't make it weird. Most people don't, I said. It's just that the loud ones make it feel like they do. I feel alive, he said, almost incredulous. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. You are, I said. You always were. You just stopped hiding from yourself tonight. His eyes glistened, and he looked away quickly, but not before I saw the emotion crack through. I thought this would make me feel smaller, he confessed, like I was indulging something frivolous. But it doesn't feel frivolous. It feels true. I swallowed past a lump in my throat. That's because it is. Later, when we stepped outside again, the city air hit us like a cold rinse. Damon pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders, not hiding, just warm. He looked up at the buildings like he was seeing them differently. I want more, he said softly. Not more clothes. More room. More permission. You have it, I said. From yourself. That's the only permission that lasts. He turned toward me, and under the streetlight his makeup looked softer, his features gentler. You know what's terrifying? He murmured. What? How much I trust you, he said. My breath caught. I don't take it lightly, I said. He nodded, then leaned in slowly, giving me time, giving me the chance to pull away if I wanted. I didn't. Our kiss was warm and unhurried, tasting faintly of citrus and the sweet edge of whatever we'd been drinking. It wasn't about performance. It was about contact, about the relief of being known. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine for a second, eyes closed. I used to think confidence was something you put on like a suit, he whispered. Now I think it's something you let yourself have. I laughed softly, because of course he'd turned it into a sentence that sounded like it belonged in a keynote speech. Careful, I teased. You're going to make me emotional. You already are, he said, smiling, and his thumb brushed my knuckles, gentle. In the months that followed, our relationship didn't become simpler. It became deeper. We stayed careful about work, about boundaries, about not turning our private truth into office gossip. But in private, Damon grew. He experimented with style the way some people experiment with language, finding words that fit his mouth. He started using a different name for himself on our dress-up nights, just between us, a playful alter ego that made him grin. He learned to take compliments without deflecting them. He learned to look at himself and see not a problem to solve, but a person to celebrate. The truth is, I didn't know at the beginning how far I wanted to take it. I had this mischievous spark, this curiosity, this heat at the idea of helping an untouchable executive become someone softer, bolder, more honest. But what surprised me was that it didn't feel like leading him anywhere. It felt like walking beside him as he led himself out of a locked room. It felt like watching someone step into the light and realizing the light didn't burn him. It made him glow. Sometimes, when I think back to that first night, the orchids, the city lights, the corporate sheen, I remember the tiny black line at his ankle and how it made my heart stutter. I remember how close I came to ignoring it, to letting the moment pass like all the other almost moments we miss because we're afraid of being inappropriate, afraid of being wrong. And then I remember Damon's voice in that cafe, the way he said it's always been there, and I feel this fierce gratitude that I didn't let my fear win. Because now, when Damon crosses his legs in my living room, dressed up and smiling, pantyhose catching the lamplight like a secret turned into silk, he doesn't look like someone hiding. He looks like someone choosing. And when he looks at me, really looks at me, I feel the strength of what we built. Not a kink we stumbled into, not a fantasy we perform, but a relationship sturdy enough to hold the truth and sexy enough to make truth feel like a spark. I can't wait to see what he chooses next. Not because I want to push him, not because I want to take him anywhere, but because watching someone become more themselves is one of the most intoxicating things I've ever known. And I'm still a little stunned that I get to be this close to it.